Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Daniel here with another video from the bookshelf. Today we are looking at Diver 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 by Brian Cull. So the full title of this book is Diver Diver Diver. RAF and American fighter pilots battle the V-1 assault over southeast England 1944 to 45. It is by Brian Cull with Bruce Lander. Just to read from the blurb, it says, during the summer months of 1944, a daily onslaught by V-1 jet-propelled flying bombs heading for London and southern England was countered in the skies of Kent and Sussex, officially by RAF fighter pilots flying Tempests, Typhoons, Spitfires, Mustangs and Meteors, and unofficially by American P-47, P-51 and P-61 airmen. At night, Mosquitoes, Beaufighters and Tempests continued the job. To the pilots, British press and bewildered public, Hitler's secret weapons became known variously as divers, buzz bombs, flying bombs, doodlebugs, dingbats, robots, jet ships, P-planes, witches and even farting furies. But they were dangerous, with thousands of civilians losing their lives. Germans used a variety of missiles, variously named such as the HS-293 and Fritz X, which are all detailed in this book, but the main enemy was the Diver, or V-1. Launched from the Pas de Calais, the V-1s came over the channel at between 1,000 to 2,000 feet at speeds approaching 400 miles per hour. They proved a difficult target to intercept, much less to bring down. However, many fighter pilots did become aces, one alone accounting for 60 of them. By March 1945, when the aerial bombardment ended, a staggering 10,000 V-1s had been launched, including 1,500 from the air. However, with 42% being destroyed by the defences, half of these alone by the RAF, it is clear tens of thousands of people were saved. In the significant work, respected historians detail every known success by the defending pilots of over 13 nationalities, and where detected, record all locations and casualties of V-1 impacts in London and the southeast. In doing so, they rely heavily not only on official documents, both German and Allied, and combat reports, but also on the vital accounts of the pilots themselves and those on the ground, many of which are quoted verbatim. So that was quite a mouthful. So the book itself is, including the appendices, is 440 pages long. If you take out the appendices, you're looking at 382. The writing is mixed, some of it is fairly large and legible, other times it's quite small. So end to end, the book is well over 470 pages long. For a book of that size, you can see that it's pretty chunky. It is surprisingly light. In terms of readability, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It started off very well in terms of informing sort of the reader of the V-1 assault, how it all came about. It was interesting to begin to learn about the early raids, but afterwards it became more of like a operational record book, so it did become quite dry, I have to admit. The chapters themselves are quite long. There's 7 chapters in total. Chapter 1 is about 15 pages. Chapter 2 is 4 pages. Chapter 3 is 89 pages. And the problem is, it's sort of, the book starts off with sort of the ideas behind the V-1 and how the assault came into being. Then it's sort of from chapter 3 onwards is when the assault begins, and the first sort of 3 chapters dealing with the assault is chapters 3, 4 and 5, and they deal with June, July and August 1944. They deal with each in turn. Then the book goes on to look at the air-launched V1s from the Henkel bombers and how the Allies attempted to intercept them. So what I found when reading this book was that the initial assault was dealt with fairly substantially. As I say, a full chapter was dedicated to June, another full chapter to July, another full chapter to August. But then the rest of the V1 assault seemed to be sort of brushed over. You had September, October, November, December, January, February, March, all rolled up in 2 chapters, which was a shame to a degree, in as much as if 3 chapters had been dedicated to 3 months, one would have hoped that subsequent chapters or subsequent months would have been given a chapter each. At the same time, I was fairly glad that they didn't, because, as I mentioned, it did get a bit dry. As there's only so many times that you can read about, a V1 coming over, a fighter intercepting, or not intercepting, and it crashing and causing disruption and killing people. And the V1 assault was a fantastic campaign in some respects from a technological point of view, in that the V1 and later the V2 were the first sort of forerunners of the weapons that we have today, cruise missiles, etc. And ballistic missiles in the case of the V2. At the same time, it was an assault which, to a degree, never really got off the ground, in as much as it wasn't exactly the Blitz. The Germans anticipated it as being a second Blitz, but it was never close to being that. So in some respects it was a campaign of mixed results. I mean, from a technological point, I've just spoken about the German technology there, in terms of it being a forerunner to today's cruise missiles, but also, as the blurb alluded to, it allowed sort of Britain to enter, or to showcase its technological advances, in that the Tempest was an extremely powerful piston-engine fighter, probably one of the most powerful piston-engine fighter to see service. And then also engaging the V1 was the Gloucester Meteor, Britain's, and indeed the Allies' first operational jet fighter. So there is a number of pictures in the book, the plate section, which contains a number of pictures, mainly of air crews. There's a couple of V1s lying on the ground, 1 or 2 of families. I mean, there's a couple of iconic pictures, such as the Spitfire with its wing underneath the V1, looking to tip it up. But really, the pictures don't really sort of add anything else to the story, as much as they just appear to be a random collection of photographs. And I mean, but as I say, it's a book of mixed fortune. It could have been so much more. It is one of those rare instances where, personally, I like a lot of detail in a book. I like to really read about a subject and understand it, and that's one thing where I think a number of histories are fairly weak, but I think this was too far the other way. As I mentioned, the initial chapters started off very well in terms of informing about the campaign, how it came about, tactics. But then, sort of when the campaign started being described, once you were halfway through June, it was a bit of a shock to realise, 50 pages in, that you were on only 13th of June and that there was still another 15, 16 17 days left to go. So it was overkill in some respect, but you know, very readable, as I say, a little bit like an operational record book, but informative. If you are interested in the V1 campaign, then it isn't a good starting point, at least the initial chapters are. It is worth reading. All histories of the Second World War I do believe are worth reading, good and bad, because every book is unique and offers its own unique sort of take on events, campaigns, and battles that were fought. And I mean, there was a book by Graham Thomas, which we may cover in another video, which was about half the size of this and covered more or less the same things, and I think it was probably a better book, but still, I would say diver, great effort, still worth a read. Yeah, that's all I've really got to say on that. If you've had the pleasure of reading this book, let me know what your thoughts are. What were your thoughts on the V1 campaign? I'm interested to hear from you. Drop that in the comments below. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, it'd be great if you could subscribe to the channel, hit a like also, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.